The MAIA team also created a, what do I call it? A soundscape, kind of like a thought process as to what we think imagination is, and we'd love to share that with you guys now. Okay, so the question is, what does imagination mean to you? When the word is said, or when you see it, what do you think about? What enters your brain? Like anything, it can be anything. I just want to know. Yeah. What does imagination mean? What is it?
When I think about imagination, I think about the radical Black imagination.
I would say imagination is the ability and the capacity to creatively think and creatively build tomorrow.
La imaginación para mí significa libertad, porque cuando imaginamos no existen restricciones, no existen las reglas, no existen respuestas incorrectas.
Imagination to me is bringing life creativity from darkness, just a thought, an idea.
Imagination to me is about having the ability to dream without limitations.
To me, imagination is what makes us human. It is our power to both manifest in real life and at the same time escape.
Just the autonomy to know that like everything that exists is created twice. So once you imagine something, you've already done half of the work.
It's definitely a place of growth and birth and abundance. It's change and development.
I think about imagination and I ask myself, what are the other possibilities? Where else does imagination live? And yes, it can bring us things like cinema or jazz or carnival or parties.
Roads,
seeing art,
to showers,
Theatre,
hearing a song,
Mario Kart,
meals, to
Saturday Soup,
making a dance piece,
Marbles,
football,
conkers,
Instagram,
clothing,
constellations,
aliens,
giving things names.
bun and cheese. There's bare examples of humans using their imagination to create something that has a life of its own, you know?
Nothing we see in our human world has not come from the imagination.
All of the ideas and people and experiences and knowledge that you're interacting with, they're always informing each other and building up into the sort of like vastness of your imagination.
But imagination has also brought us war and slavery and trafficking and violence and harm and planetary extraction.
Imagination can be dark.
It's hard to do what comes naturally when you're nurtured by a system of abuse, right? Imagination, to me, is whatever comes naturally.
As a creative, it's easy to have quite a difficult relationship with your imagination because it does just feel like if it's in you, you should be able to access it at any time.
It's natural and normal for a human to imagine, but as we get older, we start to lose it because it gets covered up and piled up with other things.
The decision makers and governors of our world either can't see beyond what exists or they refuse to. Our society then stifles the imagination of people in favour of standardisation and status quo.
To combat this, we have to break those blocks and rediscover the worlds we've hidden from ourselves and that we forgot to revisit.
Is dreaming like your life depends on it? Because a lot of the time it does.
I think we must resist the compulsion to abide to that system.
And that's how we get back to our inner child, our creative spark. It's there, it's in us.
What would life look like if everything around us was just as we imagine it should be?
Thank you so much for taking your time to listen to that with us. Just want to give that a few seconds before we get into our next conversation. So sit with me for a second. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. And thank you, Jabez, for starting off the day with the energy, and my drop shoulders are feeling good. I hope everyone's doing good. We're going to have a break in about half an hour. So if anybody did rush their breakfast because they felt like they needed to be in the Zoom call, we'll make time for you to have your cup of tea, have your breakfast and all the good stuff. Pop to the loo, whatever you need. But I'm so excited for this conversation, space and place, vision for the future. I wanted to begin this with some thoughts on space and place, and what my thoughts were. You're definitely going to hear my crying baby in the background, by the way, and what some of my thoughts were in curating today's panel. So space is abstract. It's the in-betweens, the gaps. Place is more concrete, metaphorically or literally. It's definitive. It's the room that is made when walls surround empty space. It's what is created when we stick up borders at country lines or prisons or deportation centres. They were figments of someone's imagination that have become solidified through policy and paperwork. It's how we refer to territories or sanctuaries. Space and place differ but are inherently connected. When we name them, we give them meaning. They can be safe or harmful, or an ever-changing contradiction of the two. No space is neutral because it is in direct relation to who and what surrounds it. No place is neutral because it is in direct relation to who or what establishes and names it. How we identify them, encounter them, experience them, define them, mark them, access them, boundary them, treat them. Space and place is political. For this conversation, I'm so excited to welcome friends. I must say family. I'm inspired by the Resolve crew. It's fam, innit? So I'm very excited to be joined by family who are doing important and crucial work in their respective spaces and places. So I'm going to introduce everyone first, and then we'll get into a discussion. And I'm going to say, please use the chat as much as you want, and we'll try and bring things in as we go. But we will make time for questions and, shared dialogue towards the end. So first, I'm going to introduce Mikayla Jones. Mikayla has a passion for people leading with an inclusive mindset and making room for joy along the way. If you know Mikayla, you know joy is just wrapped up in everything that this person is. So much gratitude to you, Mikayla. Alongside her personal gaming, Mikayla has made a career developing and encouraging diverse talent to reach positions of influence and leadership. With her professional experience in the third sector, public sector, as a board member, a connector, a coach, and a mentor, she has not always made enough time for joy, but a pandemic really helps with perspective. Mikayla is carving space for gaming joy through her content creating and growing a Midlands-based community of gamers that are usually forgotten. Hi, Mikayla. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello. Thank you. So lovely to be here. That was, that soundscape, that touched me, that did. Y'all are amazing. Oh gosh, I need some time. I might need a couple more minutes on that just to reflect. How are you?
We're good. Thank you so much, Mikayla, and thank you for being here. I'm going to introduce Andre Reid, a FAM member, a designer, a maker from Warsaw in the UK, and founding director of Kiondo, a design research studio, formed of a collective of artists, designers, and community builders who work to change communities through innovation and collaboration. From running public events that foster greater community cohesion and integration, to design, research, and advocacy work, bringing together communities through the shared values of social justice, sustainability, and creativity to bring about community-led regeneration. Well, go on, Andre, you're good.
Yeah, man, thank you for having me back. Wow. And like I agree with you totally. Mikayla, the soundscape was beautiful. It was amazing. Really nice to hear everyone's perspective. And it's just got my mind ticking. I can't wait to speak with all of you and just to hear all the thoughts in the room.
Thank you so much, Andre. And next we have Suriya Aisha. Loads of people know Suriya already, so I'm just going to say things that you already know. We love Suriya. We're so thankful that you're with us this morning. Suriya is an artist, activist, and producer working in the cultural and community sector. Founder of Unmuted, a network for LGBT people of colour in Birmingham, and co-director of Colours Youth Network, a youth LGBT organisation. She's passionate about creating spaces for the most marginalised communities. Suriya is also the lead artist on soon-to-be-released podcast Sick Babe Pod, which will give voice to women and non-binary folks who live with invisible disabilities and chronic illnesses. And I feel like joy is something that we're going to talk about loads today, but as a personal source of joy in my life, Suriya, thank you so much for being with us this morning. How are you?
Hey everyone, thank you so much for that, Amahra. That was I'm overwhelmed in loads of ways. That soundscape was amazing. I feel really moved to be here with you all. You know, Birmingham is my home and I absolutely love seeing familiar faces and new faces. So yeah, I'm so grateful to MAIA for continuously creating these spaces which completely shift us. Do you know what I mean? Like we have a couple of hours and I feel like we all leave shifted and reinvigorated. So I'm really excited to chat to everyone today.
Thank you so much. I'm already feeling emotional. Here we go. If I make it to the end of this session without blubbing, it will be a miracle. Seth, Akil, Wagwan family, were you there? How are you both? I'm going to introduce Seth and Akil. So they are the co-founders of RESOLVE, an interdisciplinary design collective that combines architecture, engineering, technology, and art to address social challenges. They've delivered numerous projects, workshops, publications, and talks in the UK and across Europe, all of which look toward realising just and equitable versions of change in our built environment. I feel like, guys, I took that off your website, and I feel like even that doesn't quite encapsulate all of the stuff that you do, but the soul and the spirit with which you do it in. So thank you so much for being with us this morning. How are you both?
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Thank you for having us.
Really pleased to be here as well, and also among so many friendly faces in the audience. You know what I mean? I think it's some of these events, what differs from these to other ones as well is that like you're interacting with family in the audience as well. You can see so many amazing and inspiring faces that you're talking to, and it's a peer-to-peer thing. It's not a kind of talking at someone thing, and that's really valuable, you know.
Amazing. So yes, so thank you all so much for being with us as well. And just to reiterate, please, you know, keep the conversation going in the chat, keep it going on socials, TSI 2021. And let's get into it. So one of the things that I would really love to talk with you all about is your work, but particularly how it relates to community building and what that means in your respective places and spaces. If I can come to you, Mikayla, first, just if you could talk us through the work that you're doing. Obviously, we've just literally, as of, was it last week, wrapped up the most extraordinary project. I say wrapped up, it's not a wrap up. We're just waiting till it's
January part's over. January part. We'll say it that way. Yeah.
Over. Can you just talk us through your work, your thinking? Try not to gas me up too much because you know, just go and dream up another project and it's like, you know.
Let's do it. Absolutely. Okay, so for me, I've always been a gamer. It's always been in my DNA, right? Like absolutely loved it from I'm going there. You get gassed up. Starting with the Sega Mega Drive, and it was Sonic 2. So I was sitting watching my dad play, and I was like, "Yo, this is amazing!" Got my first console, N64, mate. The hours of joy, the hours of love on that thing. Not only just like playing games like solo games, but then with the family, cousins. It wasn't like a case of, where are them lot? Everyone knew we were upstairs, we were playing Mario Kart, or we were playing Diddy Kong, or we were playing whatever, we were just dealt with and we were absolutely fine. So from then, it's always been a thing. And as I've grown and like my relationship with gaming has changed somewhat and evolved and whatever, and there's some real foolishness in the industry. There's some real foolishness that I just don't vibe with, and a lot of people don't vibe with, and it's a big industry. There's billions and billions of pounds that are in it and poured in from all of us gamers, whether you identify as a gamer, like hardcore, pro, casual, whatever it may be. And I just got to thinking last year when the happenings of last year, I say the happenings of it, I went back to gaming in a way that I hadn't in a long time, picked up a Nintendo Switch, went back to Nintendo, Mario Kart, Pokemon Sword, just hours were just lost in this game console. And I was like, you know what? I'm loving this. This is a source of joy. Why have I kept this so quiet? Too many people, I think, through conversations that we've been having, get to a professional level, and they're like, oh yeah, gaming was that thing that we did as a kid. Everyone's got like a gaming story. Everyone has. I don't business. If it's not a console, it's a board game. Everyone's got a gaming story. But somehow it's like it's this hidden thing, but it's this billion-dollar-pound industry that is clearly doing bits. And it's like, okay, well, where's the disconnect there? Where are our voices in that space? Because with gaming, like many industries, it is overpowered and overrun by older white men tailored for younger white men. And I am not a white man. I have gamed all my years. This is my space too, so make room for that. And so what's really great last year was able to see the amount of communities, when I really like lent into it, the amount of communities that are popping up that are focusing on representation within gaming, whether that's the playing of it or like the development of it. And I'm just thinking like, this is awesome. This is beautiful. This is what I want to see. I want to see myself represented in games. I want other people to feel represented in games. We spend so much time in there. It's a way that beyond film, beyond music, that you can truly immerse yourself into something. That's dope. But I was seeing a severe lack of British, and specifically when there was British, Brummie or Midlands. Brummie. Definitely didn't see enough like Midlands Brummie vibe. And okay for the UK, and wonderful for the Black British representation. Shout out to Jayanne, shout out to Stephanie, shout out to Cassie, Daniela, or like people are doing bits. But like Suriya said, we're Brum. We're Brum, and we need to be represented too. So I thought, all right, let's bring some people together who are in the Midlands that love gaming in the way that we do, and make sure that people in the industry and beyond take note of what we are. And that's, for me, that's the thing. And everything that I've done, it's about that community building, and I bring it back to the heart of Birmingham. So gaming is just the next space. So yeah, that's the building of it. I'm on Twitch now. I'm streaming. I'm out here on a weekly basis playing games in front of people. Yesterday we had a beautiful time where I finally beat Sonic Mania. And if anyone's played it, you know that it's a hard game to play. Finally beat it, and then we just was then chilling on Mario Kart with people from Germany, from Italy, from the UK, from the US, and it's dope. That's what connectivity can do from Midlands and beyond, and that's what I'm about right now. So,
it's so powerful, and you'll
so
know
powerful.
already. Like we like anyone, if you talk to Mikayla, you can't have a 5-minute conversation. So imagine when me and Mikayla started speaking about, like, you know, Mikayla was like, are you PlayStation or Xbox? And like, we just went off on one. So it was so powerful. But what you're talking about in terms of loads of people having a gaming story, everyone's got one, whether it's Scrabble or Tekken. Hold tight the Tekken massive if you're with me.
Button bashing crew.
Yes, guilty. Loads of people have a story, and this idea of community building, particularly in a virtual realm, in a time where so many people are connected virtually or disconnected from physical space, how powerful that is. Suriya, I would love to come to you. I've been an admirer of your work for a really, really long time, and it feels like there's both a physical presence and a manifestation of your work, but there's also a beautiful virtual space as well. And I wonder if you could talk us through all of your work. So Unmuted and Colours are incredible as platforms, as connections, as necessary services. And also like Sick Babe, you're doing so much. Like, can you talk us through all of the things in 5 minutes?
Gosh, I mean, thanks for reminding me what I do, because often I forget, so it's helpful. Yeah, thank you for that. I think, so Unmuted is a network for LGBT people of colour in Birmingham, and hopefully expanding that into the wider West Midlands as well. And really, the impetus for creating that space was actually a lot to do with what you were talking about, imagination. And I think a lot of what the space is in all that kind of runs through all of my work is reclaiming that imagination of ourselves. So often it's been stolen by somebody else to say, if you're a queer person of colour from Birmingham, this is what you're going to do. And you're going to eventually go to London because there's no space for you here. And there's actually no other people like you. So you have to go somewhere else, and you actually can't have fun. And you have to be in an alcohol-based space to connect with others. And so Unmuted was about reimagining, like, actually we have to be able to say to ourselves that I believe that I can thrive and be who I am, where I am right now. Yeah, if you want to leave, if you want to do what you want to do, but actually to be like, yeah, you can be who you are, where you are. And I think I was thinking about this today, this morning, what kind of was the sparking point for me to be like this, basically, to be fastening up myself, doing things like this all the time, basically. And I think it was because so I've got a chronic health condition, I've got a brain condition, so kind of live with experiences of what similar things to like traumatic brain injury, like things like that. And I went to university after I was diagnosed with the condition, and I met this woman who was like my advocate, and she said something to me. She said, because I said, oh, I keep going to like these people and asking for like adjustments. And they said, well, we don't do things like that because your kind of thing doesn't really fit into what we have already. And she said, well, you're here now, so they need to make it. They need to make the adjustments because you're here now. So, and it was like as simple as that, of like, you are worthy enough for someone to create space and adjustments for. And I really felt like that inadvertently inspired me to, that's how it works in the youth work, in the unmuted. It's like, you're worthy enough to have a space that you can be all of who you are in that space. And same thing with Sick Babe, which is about creating spaces for women and non-binary people and AFAB people who often their voices are left out of medicine, left out of the idea of disability with young people. And it's to say, your voice doesn't have to be hidden behind everything else. You're worthy enough to have space where you don't have to hide half of yourself in order to be valued. And so yeah, it was like, obviously the individual, what actually happens in the projects is what it is. But I think it all comes back to that space of, we're not centering ourselves on the imagination of what someone else told us that we are. We're going, who actually am I, and where is the spaces for to allow myself to dream who that person is.
You couldn't hear me making all my enthusiastic but they were there. Thank you so much, Suriya, for all the work you're doing, and also for just sharing that with us. I think there's some of the unmuted community might be in this conversation, but just so much gratitude to what you're doing. Andre, family, how you doing?
Hey,
what's going on?
Better now. Is the audio better now this time? Yeah. You guys know me, and for those that don't, I'm from Birmingham, but I moved to Warsaw about 4 years ago. And just last year, even in the midst of a pandemic, I decided that we needed to create space there and hold space for people and help build something full of joy as well. And just how do you create that joy when things are so hard in a space where there is poverty, where there is struggling, where there is like a lack of opportunities for a lot of people that have lived there, grown up there, and been forced to move elsewhere. I mean, my background is in architecture and design, but actually I think more than anything, it's about building relationships between different people and helping them to see opportunities and ways to build together collectively. And so the last year, been developing this idea of the People's Studio, which is kind of just to see the world as our own studio, our own space to just create things and to go out and experiment and learn. And so in the middle of Warsaw, a town that's traditionally white working class, we have a huge population of people from all different backgrounds, African, Caribbean to Polish to Gypsy, all different people from all different walks of life that exist in this one space. I know we say Birmingham's a melting pot, but Warsaw is definitely a melting pot. And I just feel like the things that need to be made need to encompass the differences and all the nuances between those different groups, and also create something new and special that holds space equitably between each different community. And that hasn't happened as of yet. And so we're starting off with this vision of creating a central hub in the town. And my work in Kyondo is really about researching and learning and experimenting and working with people to build something, not just the space, but the things in between, the culture that starts to self-propagate and help people to really reimagine what their town is from their own eyes. Yeah, and so it started with the hub on Leicester Street, right opposite the town hall. I don't know how we got it. I mean, that building shouldn't even be the value that it is. That just tells you something about the town. Like we managed to find an opportunity, which in a few years' time isn't going to be there. And so our work right now is to kind of upset the gentrification story, which is things happen from the outside in, and to work with people from inside the town to regenerate it from the inside out. And that's kind of my journey. Last year, with just over Christmas, we hosted an event, and we've hosted a couple of events. One from the Black Female Photographers exhibition, which was the first UK Black Female Photographers exhibition in the Midlands. It brought people all the way from London, from Scotland and Wales to Warsaw, a town that they've never heard of before. For Black women all over the country that are doing beautiful portraits, beautiful works of art, photography, and telling a story through their pictures. To an event last Christmas, which helped bring food from all over, from Birmingham, from the Midlands, redistribute it and bring it to Warsaw to people that had nothing. That event being designed out to serving those people now is turning into a food pantry that's going to stay there for the entire lockdown period to help assist people that, whether they have food or they don't have food or they're struggling or they know someone, can walk in and shop for free. And just making space where people can just feel free to do what they need to do and to take up space and to help people and survive, just all the good things, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're working now in terms of that story of food. And I think our next part of the journey is looking at food as a kind of, it's a convening point. Like we'll always sit around the dinner table, right? We're always around the table, like we're listening, we're eating, we're sharing stories, we're talking to people, we're exploring ideas. And so food is our next kind of anchor, how we grow food, how we share food, how those stories around food can help us to reimagine, like to start to think about the conversations, to reimagine the town. Yeah. And that's me.
There's so much resonance with so for those who were in the conversation yesterday morning, you'll remember Alan Lane talking about opening that theatre and, you know, essentially turning it into a resource, a food-based resource, a community kitchen, a community everything, to a food bank as well, to be present with his community in Leeds. And it feels like, you know, there's so much resonance, Andre, with what you're talking about. And I'm also conscious that, you know, when we've spoken about your personal connection to Warsaw, how even the idea of developing the People's Studio is like a reimagination of your right to be in community, to be a member of Warsaw. Resolve, I wonder if we can come to you just on this, because in many ways it feels like you both, and as Resolve, you work across place and space. You work in, you know, you work with and in lots of different communities. I wonder if you can talk us through your relationships to communities and your working processes in 5 minutes. Sorry.
So if you want to start.
You go and then I can chime in.
So I think that the way that we work is when we first started, which was in 2016, which seems ages ago, it was in Brixton, which is like our backyard. And so we were working locally, but we had to negotiate that between that position of designer and local. And I think it's only when you start to do things in your own ends that you realize that being a local isn't a God-given title, right? Giving a local isn't something that's completely inextricable from you. Like you step into different shoes, you start doing different things, and all of a sudden you're not so local. All of a sudden you're quite different. And I think like that negotiation, that conversation we were having in of ourselves, was something that we then took on when we started to work elsewhere. So we worked in Brixton primarily for the first couple of years. And then we got a chance to work across Europe as part of the Future Architecture platform. And from then we went to Berlin, we were in Albania, we were in Portugal, and working all these different places and trying to understand these different locals was quite a learning curve for us. And then the year after, we did a lot of work in the north of England as well, a lot of work in Chef, a lot of work in Hull, Lincoln, and all these different locals. We took a part of that conversation with us. We took a part of that conversation of working locally for us to work locally for others. And that was a really huge part of our practice, and it continues to be a huge part of our practice. And I think even though we move around, I think we bring all of these spaces with us. A part of Chef is in Hull now, a part of Hull is in London now, a part of Berlin is in Lincoln now. And it's like that kind of knock-on effect, that cumulative effect, I think is something that generates community, and generates community beyond geographical lines. It generates communities of interest, as well as more arbitrary communities of space and place, I think. Yeah, Seth.
Yeah, I think just to add to, so someone asked us yesterday, like, I think they were thinking more about this post-COVID world, or like how can you foster, like how do you foster and build community and engage with communities? And I think we're always conscious about those like titles and those words, because we see them as a result of the work that we do, but just like rather than the reason that we do the things that we do. And as Akil explained, like our approach really is to work very, very closely with people, to work very, very closely with kind of local knowledge and local understandings, local materials. We talk about using the site as a resource, which means using the physical site, but also using the psychological site. So using like local people's understandings of their area in order to inform what we're going to do, in order to inform our collaborations, in order to inform our platform and processes. And that then means that whenever we're trying to do something, it is really just land and kind of understand what's happening in the area, understand who's on what in the area, and then hopefully build these relationships and build something through those relationships. And then, you know, when we look back on it, we can say that like a really powerful community either was built or got to connect, or we helped platform different organizations so that they could kind of demonstrate and work together with their own communities. But I think it's for us, it's much more around the process. And I think hopefully, because our processes, we try to make them as like universal as possible. So it's very rare that we do anything that you couldn't replicate in your own house or on your own site or just anywhere. And a lot of it is about kind of learning from those processes, sharing those processes with others. And that then builds or at least contributes to this sense of community, which we can hopefully try and continue to do.
There's something so powerful about this community beyond geographical boundaries, and I think about that in relation to as a child of a single mom, for example, we weren't bound to one neighborhood. Like, you know, when people have like, you know, they've grown up in one household or for generations, or they can proudly say, I am from here. Like, we never had that. So anytime people are like, where are you from? Birmingham. Oh, cool. Where in Birmingham? I'm like, everywhere. What do you mean? Like, we moved where we could afford. So I'm always thinking about that. What does it mean to be working class, to be poor, to be mobile, to be all of those things? You know, how do we, a conversation that kept coming up quite a lot yesterday, and in many conversations before, is how do we think about and design for temporality as much as our right to be somewhere? This is something I would love to invite, you know, all of the panelists to remove themselves off mute. And let's be in conversation with each other. We've got what we'll do, we've got 5 minutes before we take a break. So we'll maybe start with a line of thought and then we'll come back. I would just love to, a lot of you talked about 2020, the events of 2020. It would be really interesting to learn how that impacted your work. In particular, you know, did it shift or impact how you're thinking and envisioning what the future is? Did it shift how you're imagining what your practice is?
Amahra, thanks for bringing up that point about like being working class or being poor, and because I think a lot of the communities that I was working with, real or muted or colours, you start to really understand how, you know, those basic needs of housing, food and connection, you know, that comes before anything else, any workshop, anything. Do you know what I mean? You have to kind of think, do people have access to the means that they need to survive in times of crisis? And as a community organizer, it's important not to get caught up in all the like what can seem like the pretty stuff that you can put on Instagram, and a lot of the time is spent late night calls, texting people, connecting them, buying them food vouchers, lots of things that it's like, you're never gonna, you know, you're not gonna talk about that online or in any way or put it on your website or anything. And that's it's really totally, it's literally fine, but it really made me go, it's made me think about you know, what you're reframing what you're doing, and also having to update the needs of the people that you're serving as well, because what you knew before the pandemic is going to be completely different now, it's going to be completely different after. And I think for me, that was something that I was always hold close. And also as someone who is part of the marginalized group that you're supporting, also taking care of yourself, because it is, and having to make peace with not being able to save people, which is really, really painful, because you are not close to them. You can't be in proximity, you know, close proximity. And also there's just a lot of anger, there's a lot of frustration that goes on where, you know, you're filling the gaps for the government that are letting us down. And also you're doing your best. And also, how do you take care of yourself? People's basic needs aren't met. Do you know what I mean? I lost a friend a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of that was to do with the fact that their basic needs weren't met. And so, you know, mental health crises, it kind of took over. And I think that's it's really painful. And I think that when we think about space and place and all those things, one of my places that really impacted my life in general was my nan's house. Like, and I always think about that energy and how do I recreate that in the work that I do. And so many, the facets of that were like the food, the sound, the warmth, the conversation, and the laughter. Like, those are the things that made me feel safe. And so sometimes I'm trying to rethink about coming back to those basic element of human connection and support before we go to the other stuff. And that stuff is also not going to get the accolades. So you have to think, everyone needs to also always be checking their ego all the time in the work that we're doing.
I love this point about so many things that you said there were really pertinent, but that your grandma's home as like a site for safety and joy. And those of you who were in the conversations yesterday know that we were talking about Abuelos, the hotel that we're working on, and will know like that spirit and all of the things that you talk about, the basic safety, the comfort, the warmth, the food, the conversation. Like, how do you design infrastructure that meets that need? Business needs and operational needs are another layer, but if they don't meet that, what is the purpose of what you're trying to do? And so how do you, I love this idea of designing infrastructure, whether it's a virtual space, whether it's a physical space, whether it's something in between, that can align itself to that spirit. Feels really powerful. Okay, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I always appreciate coming through to these spaces. I really, really do. Yeah, there's a lot in there in what Suriya was saying that resonates like quite deeply on me. But to go back to your question from like why last year, right? So last year brought so many feelings, so many thoughts, so many emotions, time for pause, time to reflect, time to figure out like, what the hell are we doing? There is so much loss, there's so much sadness, there's so much, just so much, right? And in those moments, I was searching, people were searching for sparks of joy, crumbs of anything just to keep them going. And I know that there's a level of, I know it's there's a level of, and I think it's important to acknowledge, there's a level of privilege around gaming, around game console, because it is not the most affordable hobby, right? It definitely isn't. But there's something about what you're saying in terms of growing up, because we moved around a lot as well, but there was always a console. And if it wasn't ours, it was our cousins. So we go to our cousins and be able to play there. So it was always this community, like this community around the console for us. It's just the way that it was. And speaking to people that and around it, there are similar stories all around. So it's like little hubs of love in different houses around these little technical devices. And it's something about the nostalgia and the security of playing at my nan's house, playing at the cousin's house, that really connected. And the reason why I mentioned Nintendo is because that, was the first love. And for a lot of people, it's like going back, it's that nostalgia and new, which is what we need. It's the escape that that folks needed in that time. One of the games that was an absolute success last year, just huge, and I don't know if anyone who's played it, Animal Crossing. Now, if you look at Animal Crossing, it's one of the basic things. You're on an island, you get to tidy up, you do your gardening, yeah, you build your house, yeah, you build your gate, you invite people over, you have a bit of a party, and then you go. That game, when we couldn't physically be together, was one of the biggest games that happened last year. We're craving that connectivity, and we find a way to get that virtually, or whatever it may be. And so that, for me, just looking at that, I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is how we can stay connected. There's always topics, and there's issues that are brought up in games, and I don't know if anyone's played Hellblade, or there are these games and opportunities to really explore mental health, explore sexual orientation, explore identity and belonging in a way that some communities wouldn't access otherwise. You can watch a film and, like, yeah, it's on for an hour and a half or whatever, but sometimes you're clocking 30, 40 hours in these games, immersed in these games. And it's about really, how can we utilize that as a true tool to feel connected and share our stories with people. And that for me, just like thinking about, okay, well, how can we do that in a mass way, and making sure that people in the Midlands are represented in that. So yeah, it was that, something just clicked for me last year of like, oh, it can connect, because I feel that it's not always something that people move forward of like, yeah, they claim so proudly, oh, I'm a gamer. It's kind of like this secret thing. But so many people have this story, and I'm just curious about, why is that a secret for you, for your joy, or is it a shame thing attached? And I just want to, release the shame. If it brings you happiness, shout about it, because we all need those sparks of joy.
Word. And also, I think Kiani is in the chat. I'm Atari Generation Pac-Man. Listen, Pac-Man is a time traveler. It knows no time bounds. I'm still a Pac-Man nerd. Atari forever. I'm also a Crash Bandicoot. That was my introduction to the PlayStation. I would love to get straight back into the conversation. I can see that the chat is popping. There is so much coming up. And I would love to explore this very, very shortly. I would love to start with Seth and Akil on this conversation about, envisioning what's possible for the future. In many ways, it feels like we can't. There's a lot of obsessiveness and fixation on like futurism and, like speculative, like let's go there, let's talk about that. And it feels like, I mean, we can do that, but it's also necessary to acknowledge and heal and recognize our past and our presence as part of that. Does this play out in your work at all, or when you're thinking about history of place, history of communities, movement of people? How does that play out in your work?
For sure, I think it plays a really huge role. Like a lot of the time when we're working on like larger projects, so we might be working with like a big architecture studio, and we're working to do a co-design project with insert name of community. Often what the jerk reaction is for a lot of people is to go into kind of wish list mode. So you go around, you can ask people what they want, what do you want, what do you want, what do you want. And if you ask me what I want, I'll tell you, man. I'll tell you, I want a Merc, I want a massive yard, I want bare peas. Like, I think it's not a productive conversation, but actually the way to move forward, and to vision the future productively is actually to look at the past, and to look at what's going on presently as well. And so whenever we do things, we try and do them in a way, and we work in a way in which we're trying to understand where value already is, what things are insanely valuable but are being designed, like undesigned as valuable by local authorities or by kind of other powers. Where are those values? What kind of people networks, what social networks are involved in those wealth, those kind of like pots of wealth, of community wealth? And how do you platform that? How do you facilitate that to grow? How do you facilitate that to be more? And that's the first step into the future, always. There's a longer look back, a kind of more historical look back, and I think a lot of, a good example of that might be the Small Axe series that just came out, in really kind of illustrating that a lot of this organization, a lot of Black organization in the UK has happened before. And we are standing on the shoulders of giants in many ways. And it's important to look back in order not to repeat the same mistakes, but also in order to actually just replicate what was great, to actually replicate what we haven't been able to so far. When we look at things like the Organization for Women of African and Asian Descent in Brixton, when we look at the UK Black Panthers, a lot of that organizational movement achieved things that we still haven't yet, that we've still yet to replicate. And actually, there's a blueprint. It's already there. The people that did it are still around. A lot of the people who are still involved in those, whether artists, writers, playwrights, whoever, are very much still about. And so that kind of connection, that looking back, I think, is also a really important part of how we get to the future.
Steph, I don't know if
you
want to.
In terms of, no, this might be like this is slightly not negative, but I was having when I saw talking about like imagination, I was having a bit of an internal crisis or something, because someone asked us about this yesterday as well, about like the future of our practice. And as Akil has mentioned, like the processes that we try and employ, I think we've had a really like useful and much needed time to reflect on these things, and to join in on these conversations, to expand our networks, to kind of to connect across different interests through this last year. But the problem, I think, is that my imagination, and I'm sure Akil is the same, is so influenced by space and by being in a space that we can't really, like, at the moment, we're very much in reflective mode. We're kind of, we're looking at what we previously did and thinking about how we can do those things better. And you know, that's from a historical lens, a socio-historical lens, but also a personal lens as well. But until we get back into those spaces, we can't, with people, we can't like imagine what we would want to do as a practice. It's just not how we're built. Like, we just can't. So that's like, even when we were talking about the collab that we're going to do in the summer, it's like we were talking with Selena the other day, and me and Akil we were just like, but we're going to come up to Birmingham. Like, we're going to come through at some point. Like that's a guarantee, because there's no way that we could really imagine any kind of future for ourselves unless we're back in those spaces and doing the things that drive us towards whatever our visions were beforehand.
I don't know if anyone else is this like inner conflict has been something that re-emerges so many times. Conversations even about imagination in the public sphere have been led by people or industry or institutions that like to extract, and that then, you know, it's no surprise that we might feel unsafe or, you know, conflicted within ourselves about what it would even take to imagine a future, like having the license to do that, or see beyond, or like having the time, like, can I do this safely? Can I do this in a space that that is ready for me, is welcoming to me? Am I prepared to do it yet? Maybe I don't want to do it now. Maybe it doesn't feel like the right time to do it now. Like, these are things that are important, I think, re-emerging.
Yeah, and I think there's also like a thing of when you jump to do something out of fear, anxiety, or ego, or whatever, who are you leaving behind in that process? You know, when we think of our kind of disabled community, the folks who are experiencing the pandemic in a whole different way, those who are parenting, those who are young people, like everybody's having a totally different experience. And like you were saying, Seth and Akil, we're not having those same types of conversations that we have in youth group, in the cafe, in these things, which inform so much of our work. And I think I really relate to the idea of a lot of what I've been doing last year and in this year is listening to, you know, those who have come before, hearing about the projects that have existed, like in Birmingham, in our spaces, from elders, from ancestors, from aunties, from uncles, from people who have already been doing. I want to know what can we learn from to ensure that this work is still here in 50 years in the way that it needs to be, as opposed to kind of going through these burnout cycles, which a lot of us in the community often do go through, because we're working in that fear and reaction, and sometimes it's really necessary, but often that's what, so I was talking about before, about making peace with the idea that you can't save everyone right now, is a really real thing and a really hard thing, because often you're like, I know I need to sit for a bit, but also I'm very aware of everybody hurting in my community in a very visceral way. But I do think that that slowing down and listening and like learning from those who have done before is such an important part of the process in where I'm at with my work right now, I think.
I totally agree with you. I think it's central to our work at Kyondo as well. It's always about starting from the root of the problem, and the root, it was there a long time before we were here. A lot of the things that we create don't actually get realized in our lifetime. Design is slow, is kind of how I see it. Design is really slow and people are really impatient. So what Akil says about people creating shopping lists, it's all reactive. Like, people want what they feel, what they can respond to, like immediately. And it's really difficult sometimes to take people on that process. Oh, thank you. Got breakfast. It's it's really difficult sometimes to take people on that process of like really reflecting on the past and going back into that trauma that sometimes exists there, and trying to find that as a basis for hope and imagination. I think one of the biggest challenges we come across is trust, and it's trust not just of the outside world, but trust inside as well, and that's really impacted by it's a kind of a vicious cycle. If you can't trust the outside world, sometimes you can't trust the decisions you make as being things that will be successful. So you start to give yourself options, and the more options you get, the harder it gets to really have a clear vision of what the future might be. And so I think some of the processes do lie in like education, reflection, experimentation, and giving people opportunities to test things out in spaces where they wouldn't really be able to test things out. Like it would be me walking into going into architecture and being in a room full of white middle class white males and having to exist in that space for a while until I'm comfortable. But some people will never enter that space. And how do you get people into those spaces? It's also dealing with the politics of the environments which set people up essentially. You see it all the time in Warsaw. I mean, I've been working in there for like the last year, working with the politics of the situation, trying to squeeze.
Oh, you put yourself on mute. How did that happen?
Is this working now?
Yes, you were in a flow. It was going.
It was coming. Where did it go on mute?
Just the last second or so.
Second. Yeah, we've just been trying to work out how to squeeze like the resource and the support from like the power players and the politics and all of that, and it's the most difficult thing, and yet it's a necessary part of the system. And it's how do you shift that culture? How do you shift it over time? And can people survive the journey? Like that's the biggest thing. Can people actually survive the way? When we was working with the homeless outside, can they survive the journey of going through that reflection and going through the design process? Some people can't, and we need to find ways to literally support people on that journey. I think that's where we're at.
We're seeing that more than ever before. I mean, in many ways 2020 was an accumulation of things that have been happening, and you know for as long as we can remember, for as long as generations can remember, a lot of the things were not new experiences or new phenomenons, but the visibility of them, or the desire, I don't know, the desire to acknowledge felt really, really present. And there is something about that. How do you do? And it's also about not like one entity or one person necessarily responding to everything. So there are some people and some organizations and some movements that need to respond to the here and now, the today, the how do we ensure that more people can survive and get to tomorrow, and also people that need to be doing that longer term, allowing for patience, allowing for longer design, allowing for processes. But we often find that there's such a disconnect sometimes between those things, and that's where we're seeing even more devastation, even within our communities, even within movement work, even within people that are, socially just or operating from that vantage point. The duality of all those things, it's a lot.
It is a lot, and for me, when I was listening to what you're saying, listening to what Andre's saying, listen to everyone and just soaking it in as much as possible. The space of that building trust, not only with others, but within yourself as well, to be able to truly trust in yourself, to take that move, to take that step, like harnessing the power within you of everyone before you. Like that's a practice, that's development, and that's how I believe how you get that is one of the ways is through play, and that safe space to play, to cocoon in whatever, do what you need to do to not cut off, but just take that reset time for you, and then be able to then go out and do what you need to do. And just allowing yourself that space, and allowing yourself that time, that's a big step. That is a big piece of resistance, because we are needed and wanted and demanded on every level so much, every single minute of every single day. When do we just take that time, when just that rest, let me reset, let me be sure, let me align, and then do what I need to do. So when you were talking, Andrea, about like the politics of things, the politics of play everywhere. When do we get to just like rest to resist? I find that in gaming. And so that's another reason why I was just like, let's just make sure that people have an access to get back to them. Just play, y'all. Please just go out and play as much as you can, please.
And I think on that, I think one thing that you said there, Mikayla, is something that I know I've been in conversation with Suriya about previously, about that constant availability to your community as well.
Yeah.
And because we're trying to be and maybe fill so many gaps that state won't provide, or institutions don't give, and resource that isn't there, that we, or our communities become the everything for people, and it is exhausting, and it's also killing us. And that point, I think, Suriya, that you made about like how do we ensure that we're going to be here tomorrow to continue doing that work, like and that's a real thing. And Lord knows I've felt that more than ever before. Like I thought this year was going to like knock me out, to be honest, in January, but I'm really chiming with this. And I think it's one of the things that I really treasure about not just the work that you're all doing, but the spirit that you're doing it with, as you're all like personal sources of joy in my day to day. But the work that you're doing is just it's exciting. It's a thing that keeps me hopeful. I want to ask it back to you, like, what are the things that keep you hopeful, both in the work that you do, but whatever it means for you to get to the next day? What are the things that keep you hopeful?
I think, without sounding cliche about talking about young people, I think that a lot of me reevaluating space has been like, right, okay, so I'm nearly 30. Do you know what I mean? That's borderline in auntie age. That's borderline in kind of going into that space where you have to go, okay, cool. So what does my space look like as a role model? And also passing on, those skills, those battons, to make sure that it's like you were saying, we might be here to do the community organizing for this period. And then we're like, okay, cool. If the young people that want to take up the next bit, they're doing different parts of the work. So I think that allows me to, because even like over the pandemic, what's really interesting is you realize that, some young people that we're working with started the pandemic when they were 16 and will be leaving when they're 18. Like, and that is like, those 2 years are like a massive point of growth, isn't it? So a lot of the young people that we work with are going to be at that point where they want to do things in the way that we wanted to do things. And so that kind of gives me hope that it's like, when I'm kind of where I'm losing energy, that it's like we're creating the levels of community. And I really love being in spaces that are like so many different ages and older people, younger people, because it really gives you that hope of like, what you don't have and know, I have and know. What I don't have and know, you have and know. And that really allows me to go, the hope is that I don't have to be alone. We don't have to do these things alone. And so when you're kind of feeling that feeling of like, oh, don't know if I can do this anymore, it's like you just have a chat with someone. I went to like Mikayla's thing with that after party with gaming, and I was like, actually, true saying, like, Crash Bandicoot is a big part of my work. Do you know what I mean? In the sense of, I need to play Crash Bandicoot to ensure that tomorrow I can get up and do the work that I need to do, make the calls I need to make. So it was like, yeah, your insights given me to make sure that I grow, and that that gives me hope that we're all passionate about our things, and in some ways we can like tap each other in and out when needed. So that you know, you all give me hope, basically, everyone here in various ways.
Yeah, completely echo that. Like, I can't remember when it was. A couple of years ago, I said to Akil, like, a kind of informal promise that we'll make sure that we don't become the guys who just do the same thing over and over and over and over again, and that people don't come to you and they think, oh, you guys are going to come through with the banana boxes, and it's just the same thing, and everyone's like, oh shit, it's these guys with the boxes again. And I think the only way that we can do that is by learning from other people and collaborating with other people and joining other people. And I think it's conversations like this, it's conversations like we had with you guys last week, the Sound Advice Awards, all of these kinds of things where you get to like share like proper energetic spaces, and then they project you into those, and those kinds of inspirations can last for a couple of months, right? And then you need another fix, and then you can. So like the whole time when Mikayla's talking about gaming, I used to love gaming. Everyone used to love like banging PlayStation, but I haven't really entered a conversation around gaming in the way that you were speaking about it in a long time. And when you're talking, well, this is the thing. When you're talking, I was like, you know what? This is good, man. This is good. I'm kind of waking up and learning some things, and like learning about someone who's operating in a space that I don't know about. And now I'm thinking, you know, there's angles that we can come at. Do you know what I mean? There's definitely things that we can do that is going to keep me going for a couple of months at least.
I totally agree. Like on a practitioner level, like us people that are like trying to lead on the work, without games, I probably wouldn't be here like surviving doing this work. I mean, for a few, there was a time, especially I think I caught COVID like in September, and after I came out of that, I was like completely disorientated. And after that point, I just started to link up with my friend and play Crash Team Racing. And that's how I got through. So I would start the day, do my work, and then by 4 o'clock I'd clock off, and I'd call my friend, and we'll just hit a game up, and that would be my way to recover and make sure like I was rooted in just relaxation and just rest and just play and all of that. And that would always give me space to think. I think for a lot of it's a spiritual journey just to do this work. It's not just personal. It's not just it's more. It's like you're moving towards your life's purpose, innit? And you're doing your life's work. And so it's really...
Sorry, come on, Andre. Come on.
It's important for all of us to like just make sure that we're connecting with each other, and this ecosystem, like MAIA, I say it again, like you guys have curated such a beautiful conversation here, because all these people in the room were on the same wave, and that's really hard to find, and we're all building. So I think just spaces like this are super important in terms of propelling us forward.
Akil, I don't know if you want to add anything, or Mikayla.
Akil,
I would just build on. I mean, I'll be super short, because I'm not sure how much more there is to say after what you guys ever put on the table. But I definitely just building on the thing about connecting to one another, and also what Seth was saying. I mean, like sometimes last year, I remember someone was asking me. I don't think I was being interviewed for something. I can't remember what it was, but you know, when you're in WAS mode, you're chatting crazy amounts of WAS. He was talking about like all the crazy things that are going to happen, and like how the revolution is going to start, and how land is going to get reclaimed, and how we're going to do all these crazy things, and how we're going to do it right now. It's going to happen tomorrow. And then they're like, "Do you actually believe that?" And I was like, "I don't know if I believe that, but I definitely believe in the people around me that are doing that." You know what I mean? And so I think that's it, really, full stop. Like whatever happens, happens. Whether we win, whether we lose, whether we succeed or fail. But the people around us, I think, are invested in so much, are doing such amazing work that is valuable in of itself, like regardless of the aim, regardless of the object, regardless of the outcome, the work itself, the process is so valuable that it's like, that really keeps me going, connecting in new spaces, linking up on a COVID safe thing, hopefully soon to be non-COVID safe. All them things are just so valuable.
I totally agree with what everyone's saying about connectivity in these spaces and seeking these spaces. So keep on seeking these spaces, keep on exploring, keep on being curious. For me, it will always come back to family, in terms of knowing what they've put into me, instilled into me, and our family values. Like there's just always been cousins about, there's always uncles, aunts, there's always just family around, right? So I know that I'm in a very lucky situation that I have my grandparents about. I've got my two nannies, and so being able to have conversations with my one nanny in particular about just going for it. And she's in her late 80s, right? And she's like, I'll do this and do that, and make sure you go for things, and make sure that you don't have the regrets. Like just that, when you just spend some time with elders and just listen, it hits differently, and you take that on. On the flip side of that, there's my baby cousins who, for me, it's Lola. She is an absolute joy. She's just the best. She's got so much energy. She's got so much life. She's a beautiful little black girl. And what I see as a mission is to do whatever that I can so that she comes to my age, again, 33 this year, hey, she doesn't have as many of the hits as we've had to endure. And she doesn't have as many of the hits that my nan had to endure. So what am I doing right now, right today, yesterday, with any space that I'm in to help the situation that Lola can come up in and take as much space as she needs, as she wants, as everything. But that perspective of like generational, okay, where we're at, but knowing that it's not unique to my family, it's everyone's family that are in this boat, right? What are we each doing to make sure that we're learning from those who was before, and making sure that we're making the right path for those that are coming up behind us? She's already at a disadvantage. This world doesn't deserve Lola, but I'm trying as best I can in the way that I can, because we've all got our ways, the way that I can, to ensure that the world is at least prepared that little bit more for her. That's all that we can do.
Yes. There was a conversation yesterday about just that the things that we're doing in our lifetime, flipping that from thinking about the outcomes and what we see, we're not going to witness them, all of them, and that actually if we're designing for and with that next generation, and it's a baton passing process, and because those are the things that we have, exactly what you're talking about, we have benefit from those. We are part of that baton passing as well. I want to thank you so much. There's a lovely conversation in the chat about architectural art education that I feel could be its own panel discussion, and I would love to see you please continue that conversation, independently, have it on Twitter so that more people can connect with it, because it feels really important. If you use the hashtag TSI 2021, we can all connect with it. I think there's a really important point that June Lin made about what do we mean by local community. It's so important to embrace local knowledge and leadership, as well as disrupt a prerequisite to be local, to build a community. For new migrants, you're never local, but we bring fresh eyes, ask questions about deep-seated structures. As designers, I'm interested in how we create a clarity of processes, structures for people, old, new, transient to a location, and how that can feed into decision making.